Hello everyone, we're doing our best of 2020, well favorites of 2020 series, and today we're talking about our favorite books that we read in 2020. Good mix of stuff here, I believe. I think I read a lot of fluff this year, just kind of like fun, happy fluff, but my first one goes against that, my number 10, so we're doing each our top 10. We'll start with our number 10 spot. My number 10 is one of the few nonfiction books I read this year, Japan's Dreaded Military Police, all about Japan's secret police during World War II.
So happy.
Yeah, the very fascinating book though, so I really enjoyed that, and that was my number 10.
I needed happier things this year than you. My number 10 is Up Till Now. It's a William Shatner autobiography. It's not a very good book, but it's entertaining, and I can hear him because it's Shatner, so that makes it super entertaining, and I enjoyed that book very much.
My number 9, getting into more of the just kind of comfort reads. I read a lot of Star Trek and Stargate and those type of things. One that I thought was pretty good was Stargate SG-1, The Price You Pay. And that was a pretty interesting read as far as these ones that aren't based off episodes. Some of his original stories are hit or miss. This is one of the better ones about a planet where the gold would get hosts from. It was a planet that was set up to really just be for that purpose, and that was pretty interesting. One that could have worked as an episode type thing.
My number 9 would have been a better book if it didn't require a college level class before I read it. I really liked this book. It was fantastic, but they assume that I've taken like Marilyn Monroe 101.
There's assumed, I've read that as well, that there's a lot of assumed knowledge, and it's definitely one because it is a compilation of research from a lot of previous books on the same subject. It is definitely something where it assumes you have a familiarity with the subject matter already.
But Marilyn Monroe, A Case for Murder, really, really interesting. I never read anything from this time period. Didn't know anything about anything, and they just mention names just casually and things that happen, like I should know what this is and have a lot of background, which I do not, but if you do, this is a really good book. Otherwise, be prepared to take notes and look things up constantly. Really good book.
See, my number 8 is another Stargate SG-1 book, Four Dragons, which I really enjoyed. Thought this was interesting about the gold Lord Yu and some real mind games with Daniel Jackson. So it turned out pretty good. I really liked it, and it was a good tie-in to episodes that happen around the same time this book takes place. So that was just a fun read, fun casual read there.
This I got to resell, and then I realized it smelled like sunscreen.
Sunscreen.
So I didn't want to sell it.
Oh, so you read it yourself?
So I read it myself. I'm not interested in the Netflix series at all. Maybe I should be, because Janeway's on it. It's Orange is the New Black. This year I read a lot of stuff that's just
things
fluff.
You wouldn't normally read, yeah.
It's 2020. It's a very stressful year. Just want to read happy things. This isn't very happy, but it's fluff. So not a bad book. Just a nice, casual, don't have to think too much read.
My number, we're at 7, is a Battlestar Galactica book, Battlestar Galactica Rebellion, one of a handful that was done by Richard Hatch himself, along with Alan Rogers. So that was a pretty fun read, and again, it's nice having ones that are related to the original Battlestar Galactica series, since I was cut so short. It's cool to have more stories.
It's cool, it's Richard Hatch.
It's Richard Hatch, yeah, and that's another thing too. It's like you get someone who's deeply involved in the show, doing the books, and really continuing that story and that world, before we got the rebooted series and everything. So that was just a fun read, and I had not read that one before.
My number 7, I think it's several years ago now, I found in the bargain room this whole series of the Bulgarian, which I had never read before. I had never read any David Eddings. Really liked the series. And then randomly we found, I think last year we found it, and I just ended up reading it this year. It's kind of a companion piece, Polgara the Sorceress. Really enjoyed this. Pretty big, but very nice book.
For you, it's like normal.
This is what I used to, when I wasn't an adult with things to do.
Yeah.
But
my number 6 is another Star Trek book that I've had and been meaning to read, but never got around to.
That does look really good.
This is good. From the original series, it's Star Trek Spock's World. I enjoyed this because the way it sets up the book, it very much, the book is set up in the same way that Spock is a man of two worlds, and it really goes into a chapter with Spock and then a chapter that really gets involved in the history of planet Vulcan, and it's fascinating, and there's some things in here that from the time this was written to like now are like no longer kind of part of the canon, but it's other things. It's an interesting experience, but it's really more about the essence and the spirit of Vulcan and the culture, and really and of Spock and the turmoil of being between these two worlds and coming to an understanding of that character. So if you approach it like that, it's actually a really fun read. It was really interesting.
Because those look really good. My number 6 is also, well, not also nonfiction. Yours is fiction. This is nonfiction. It's the Black Dahlia Files. This author was actually, Donald Wolfe was mentioned a lot in Marilyn Monroe. I think he wrote a Marilyn book as well.
Yeah.
I really like this. Unlike this is actually like for normal people who don't know a ton.
It doesn't. There's no assumed.
There's no
knowledge.
There's no assumed knowledge, and it's very accessible for people because I've never read anything about Black Dahlia. I've always wanted to, and this is a really good book. I would definitely recommend this one. Fantastic. I don't know where I'm going with that.
Number 5 is Star Trek TNG Blaze of Glory. Again, just another one of these fun, fluff books, but a good adventure, and like the original series books, the TNG books are also hit or miss. Some are could have been good standalone episodes, some are just kind of like, I enjoy Star Trek, read some Star Trek fluff, but it was pretty decent. This was a fun one, so I enjoyed that.
My number 5 was a book. My sister was getting rid of books. She was going through all of her books, and this was in the pile. And I don't think she actually ever read this because she didn't seem to know what it was. It's called Lily by R.R. Walters. I've never heard of this. It's a horror genre. It's really good, and it's not super predictable, which was nice. But just something different, and really enjoyed it. I really didn't read a whole lot of horror this year, so definitely recommend that one.
My number 4 is a fascinating nonfiction book that I had heard interviews with the author before, and I'd heard it, talked about it on NPR for a while, and I just never picked it up. We found it randomly at a thrift store. So, The Radium Girls, The Dark Story of America's Shining Women. Fascinating book. Definitely
really
check it out. A great piece of history. And a fun read, and it's fantastic.
Was it fun?
It was a very interesting read because it's not overly dry. Because sometimes certain topics when they're tackled, depending on what the writer is like,
it
they
can be
overly dry, overly analytical. Could be just the bare facts, which are interesting to know, but this is woven a little more like a story. Yeah, it really gets into the personal lives of the women involved in the different court cases and things like that. It really portrays them as a character, real life people, as a character to really have an understanding and sympathy for the people involved.
Yeah.
And so it's fascinating. Good read.
My number 4, also watched for the first time this year.
Oh, yeah.
One of my favorite stories. I was not expecting to like this as much, and then I was really excited when I found the book at a thrift store. Seems to be our MO. It's Shutter Island. This is the original story before it became the movie. And it is a little bit different. There are things I definitely like about the movie better, but this has some interesting things that the movie doesn't, which sometimes it can't because it doesn't translate. But I love this story. It's amazing. It's just, I can't say enough good things about this. If you haven't seen it or read it, you should. You should.
Yeah, and I will read that one. Speaking of comfort reads, which is a lot of this year, my next is actually a series. My number 3 is this stack that I went through in like 2 months or whatever of Charmed books that I had not read. Love the series. It's one of my go-to just kind of fun, relaxing shows. To think about too much. Just really enjoyed it, and that was what these books were too. These were come home in the evening and just kind of want to relax and read something that's fun. And I would read, some were better than others, but overall just, having fun and going on further adventures with these characters were decent. Again, some of them were just kind of, throwaway stories and just kind of fun with the characters, but there were a few that could have actually been really, really good episodes of the show. There were some that were fairly well written, so it was a good mix, just like how every one of these things based off of franchises, the book versions.
Yeah.
Some are fascinating and others are just kind of a junk read, but Yeah, so all those, that's my number 3.
My top 3 are fantasy because
That's what you read the most of.
that's like the most comfort of all the comforts for me this year. I needed it more than other years. I thought that this was yours. I don't know where. Sometimes our collections are so big of books that like sometimes you don't realize where you accumulate. I have no idea where this came from. This is the Enchanted Forest Chronicles by Patricia Reed. I've heard of this author. I know I've heard of her, but I don't think I've ever read anything of hers. This is like super high fantasy. This is like just beyond high fantasy. And it's just like a warm, cozy blanket, which I needed this year. So I love this. This is just, it's really well written. It's very funny. It's just comforting, fluffy wonderfulness. And you wouldn't like it. But I do.
My number 2, one that was on your list, but higher on mine, I think for an understandable reason.
Because you actually understand.
Yeah. Well, is Marilyn Monroe: A Case for Murder? And that's the difference, and that's the one thing that is, I would say, is a criticism for this book, is that it is one that no matter who you are, it's fascinating, but
it is
you
really
get so much more out of it if you already understand a lot about the subject. It's one of those that it references a lot of previous books written about this exact same subject, and then
this is like a college level class. Like you would have this book for like a college class.
You get to research whatever. It's interesting because it's if you've read previous works on this subject, and if you've watched documentaries, things like that, like I have, like because you watched some after reading this with me, some documentaries.
But I knew nothing about the Kennedys. I knew nothing about Frank Sinatra. I knew nothing about the FBI. The FBI I knew more about than anything else, and that was.
Yeah, but
not mentioned as much in there.
The biggest difference was that I was going in
knowing
with
things.
some required knowledge to understand what's going on. You were
knowledge.
This isn't a subject or
but
an actor or a time period. But it's not a thing that you've explored that much before.
Never.
Versus this is a time period and a subject that I have explored before. So that was, I think, the big difference.
It is a really
liked
good.
It. So yeah, but it's
really good.
Fascinating. Marilyn Monroe I really enjoy. I put up a video just a few months ago, I guess a half a year ago at this point, of my collection of Marilyn Monroe movies and stuff. And so I really like Marilyn Monroe. So this was definitely a subject that interested me, and I really enjoyed this book because I've been meaning to read it for a while and never got around to it.
Now, number 2, this is a whole series like the Enchanted Forest Chronicles, which is 4 books. This is also 4 books. So we're just putting them together.
So you're number 2. I'm curious what your number. I know your number 1 is now. I remember
because you just looked at the paper.
No, I didn't even see it.
So this is the Princess series, which is a horrible series name.
Yeah.
I found this, which is the Stepsister Scheme. This is the first book. I don't know how I magically found the first book. At a thrift store for 25 cents. I thought it looked really stupid.
It looks like this quality.
Yeah,
you know it looks like that.
And it's explained as if it's like a Charlie's Angels with fairy tales. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, I can sell it. Maybe Stefan will read it. I decided to read it because I wanted something, again, stupid and fluffy and something that I wouldn't have to think too much about. And I devoured it in like a day. And I loved it. And it was amazing. I've never heard of Jim Hines before. Yeah,
there's not as much fluff as you'd think.
There's not as much fluff. It is very dark. And then I purchased the next 3 in the series. This is the entire series. The Mermaid's Madness, which I liked better than you. This is my favorite in the series. Red Hood's Revenge. Fantastic. And then this is the last one, The Snow Queen's Shadow, which is also very good. But not as good as this. He's going to tell you otherwise, but he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Giving away stuff.
But it is. This is a really good series. I would definitely recommend it. I can't wait to read more from him.
Yeah,
I'm really excited to. He's very funny, but very dark. And I just really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It was just amazing.
So, as Amanda already hinted at, my number 1 is the Princess series. Which finished.
Is really funny to me that your favorite thing this year was fantasy.
Yeah, because normally it's like either a nonfiction book or science fiction. Usually fantasy, like I enjoy, but I don't read the same.
And this is
like
almost high fantasy,
almost. Yeah, it skirts that line. It's like I would say that it is very similar to something like A Forgotten Realms or Dragonlance book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
very similar in that.
Skirts it's not quite, but it's close.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, just the very concept of it takes Cinderella, Snow White, and Sleeping Beauty.
Like, look at this.
All right.
Look at this cover.
Yeah,
versus
it reminds me. It's like that type
it's
of
like
thing.
Charlie's Angels.
Yeah,
with,
and that's the idea. Is these three based off those fairy tales, but a completely different, darker twist, but not to the point of sometimes they make sort of like almost like horror movie versions of those. But it's not that. It's just that the truth has been twisted a little bit, and there's something a little more complex behind the stories, and they're interesting characters, and he uses that as just a base to then create his own original fantasy world. It's not just within the realm of those fairy tales. That's the starting point. That's where like start this idea here and grow from there and make it your original fantasy world in the vein of something like a Kryn from Dragonlance or Forgotten Realms, that type of thing.
Yeah, it is very Dragonlance.
And it starts off like I really enjoy this one. It's good, and it's a good balance of humor as well, especially from my favorite character, Snow. You like Talia the best.
Talia's the
my
best.
second favorite.
Talia's the best.
Interesting characters, well written, and a fleshed out world. It doesn't seem like surface and bland. It doesn't. There's some very original concepts, really good, and then that's expanded upon. In The Mermaid's Madness, it's still a really good book, and a couple of new characters are introduced here. Great one.
But then, the best one.
Well, I do agree. We both agree these are the two best, I think.
Yes, by far.
3 and 4.
By a lot.
I think, because.
And I think part of that is due to being able to set it up in the first two.
Yeah, the first two really set up the world, because here it's also very contained on the one area, one kingdom, and here it expands the world, and you get a little more background detail on the characters. And then these are, I would say, like this is Talia's book, and this is Snow's book. As you explore their lands, their other kingdoms, these two are more complex. There's more going on. There's much more originality. These branch out more beyond just the fairy tales, and there's a lot more creativity. So I think it ends on really good notes. So.
And I think if it had continued, it would have ended up getting more political and serious, and I think that's why he stopped.
Yeah, this is the most lighthearted, and I think, and
that's contained. You could just read this.
You could just read that, and it could be done. That's
good.
its own story. And the rest just expand the world. But these were, so much better because I know, again, you explained how you weren't expecting a lot from this.
I really wasn't expecting
I read
anything.
them because you enjoyed them so much more than you thought.
After I read the first one, I said, you need to read this.
And it's like, all right, I got into the first one, and it's fantastic. These so much more. I thought these were going to be just fun, kind of casual reads that were enjoyable. I didn't think they'd make.
I thought they were going to be very like stereotypical, tropey, like I'm
throwaway,
Cinderella.
I was thinking in the same vein. It's just throwaway comfort food books, not because that's what a lot of this year was, comfort food books.
Yeah.
But it was better than that. It was a higher class of fantasy than that.
It really
These
was.
are, I think, as much as I enjoy the way the cover art looks, especially this one here, it's definitely a much higher class of fantasy than I think the covers portray it as. But yeah, really good books.
Yeah.
I think those are fun.
So my number one is not high fantasy, which is my biggest comfort food. It's actually what I read growing up a lot more, which is more epic fantasy, which unfortunately I can't really read a whole lot of as an adult because
time-wise, yeah,
it's kind of a problem.
Time-wise, yeah.
These are anywhere from 400 to 700 page books, and they're really small print. But I love the series. This is a series that we had for years, and I assumed you had them.
They were mine.
Okay.
I'd only gotten around to reading the first one, and then it had been so long that I'm like, I have to go back and reread the first one. I just haven't gotten around to it.
And we were missing the last two, I think, or the last we were missing 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah.
And they are the Wayfarer Redemption by Sarah Douglas, who is an Australian author. I love epic fantasy. I love the politics. I love the fantasy elements of it. I think so many people, when they think of fantasy, think of talking dragons and bunnies and rainbows and unicorns.
Yeah.
And fantasy is so much more than that. And this was very comforting and very this was such escapism for me. And in a year when I didn't think I was going to be testing people for COVID all year and just horribleness and watching people die and just horrible things
this is more
every
like
day.
A Dragonlance. That's more like a Robert Jordan.
This is it's very Robert Jordan, and I just this was such a nice series to just dive into and just try and forget all of the horrible things around me that were happening, and I absolutely love this. It breaks down into basically 2 different trilogies, and I like the first one much better, but they're together. It's better together, but. I think it should have been separated into 3 the way it was in Australia, but...
Oh, it was?
In Australia, it was released as 2 different trilogies in the same universe.
Right.
Because, like, I think it's like 30 years passes.
Yeah.
But this is the better of the 2. But I would definitely recommend reading both. It's really good, really political, really just, it's awesome. It just has everything in it, and I love it so much. It makes me so happy. But it's a thing. This is going to take you a while. This is not...
Yeah, make sure you have the time to set aside.
That's it.
Yeah.
But it was really necessary this year to read.
Yeah.
Read something like that. But
So those were our favorite books that we read of 2020, and we're also going to be filming today our favorite movies that we saw. Again, stuff that was new to us for the year.
yes, not necessarily new. I don't think anything was new.
Yeah, I think maybe one or two, and then also video games. So we're doing 2 more. So check those out. I don't know what order I'm going to be uploading these, so they're either out already or they're coming up really soon.
But let us know
look out
your
for
favorite
those.
books.
Yes, I'd love to hear what you read this year. Did you do the same thing, a kind of comfort
Escapism.
food escapism, or were you more
And let us know for
historical?
next
Like, what'd
year.
you read? Yep. Yeah, any suggestions?
Because
definitely.
I always am looking for suggestions.
Yeah, because again, a lot of these were ones like this random find if someone suggested this, maybe
Yeah.
earlier. But yeah, just interesting, fun reads for the year. I'd love to hear what you explored, and we'll see you in the next video.